This podcast is about introducing our fans to the animals, plants, and other products that we work with at Josh's Frogs. It's an opportunity to paint a picture of our hobby that is refreshing. We want you guys to be successful with the animals that you're keeping, and we want our hobby to grow ethically and sustainably into the future. Welcome to the Josh's Frogs podcast. Today I've got Amelia in to talk about a new group of frogs for us. But before we do that, just want to let you know that the Josh's Frogs podcast is sponsored by joshsfrogs.com. We're your one-stop shop for all your reptile, amphibian, and pet bug needs. We sell only captive bred animals, and then we sell all the feeder insects you need to feed those animals, as well as live plants and all the dry goods you need. So from caging to lighting to substrates to heating, all that kind of stuff, we carry all of that. We offer a 72-hour, so 3-day live arrival guarantee on any of the insects that we ship. So any issues, you just let us know and we'll replace them. And then we have customer service agents available to talk you through anything if you have any questions. And then we produce a lot of videos and blogs and how-to articles because we want you to be successful with what you're keeping. So check those out. Learn a little bit about the animals you want to keep or the animals that you are keeping. So without further ado, welcome, Amelia. Tell us a little bit about what you do here at Josh's Frogs, what you work with, and how long you've been doing it.
I'm a tree frog and toad keeper. I'm coming up on my 3rd year here at Josh's, beginning of June.
Wow.
It's mid-May now, and so that's mostly daily maintenance of all the animals that we have for sale, some breeders, facilitating some breeding events. And one of the groups of frogs that are under my care are our Thelodermids, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Cool. Tell us about Thelodermas. Like, what is that group, and what are some things that are true about all the frogs that are in that group?
So Theloderma are a group of frogs from Asia, Southeast Asia mostly, lots of them around Vietnam and the surrounding area. They're in the family Rhacophoridae, and the genus name Theloderma literally translates to nipple skin. They have a lot of texture on the skin of most species, with a few exceptions like Lysin, which have the common name locally of literally just the smooth frog, or whatever that translates to in Vietnamese, I imagine.
Yeah.
And they are kind of classified like tree frogs in terms of their shape of their toes and all that, but they are more semi-aquatic, nocturnal, cool weather loving species. And there's only a handful of species available in the pet trade, but there are quite a few of them out there in the wild. Generally, they're pretty least concern, but there are a few on the endangered species list, and some of them are kind of near threatened or data deficient, like a lot of amphibians.
Yeah, really cool camouflage pattern on a lot of them. They're kind of one of those one of my favorite frogs that you look in a cage and you're like, where is it? I don't see it. And then when you see it, you're like, oh, I see it. Like, I know where that frog is. It's kind of cool how they do that.
The Vietnamese Mossy frog is the most well-known, and they are not kidding when they call it the Mossy frogs. They absolutely do just look like little clumps of moss.
Yeah. So size is a big difference on those and some other characteristics. So talk a little bit about the Mossy frog, how big they get, what they kind of look like, and just give us a little bit of background on the Mossies.
Mm-hmm. So the Vietnamese Mossy frog, Theloderma corticale, is one of the largest. Females are going to be a little bit bigger than the males, but it's not a really extreme difference with these guys. So they're going to get around like 4 inches or so. Pretty chunky, especially females when they're mature and ready to breed. Then we've also got another species that we work with, Theloderma bicolor, which is known as the mini Mossy frog because they look very, very similar. They're just kind of scaled down. They only reach maybe half the size of the Mossy frog.
That's cool. Talk a little bit about cage size then. Like, I'm guessing they're set up very similar, but the cage size might be a little bit different between those two. So talk a little bit about how you set them up, and then maybe some cage size differences based on how large the frogs are.
So these guys will climb, but they'll use horizontal space more, especially being kind of semi-aquatic. So we keep all of our Theloderma on water here at Josh's Frogs, and that allows them to just breed right in their tanks when they want to do that. We have male and female groups that just breed whenever they feel like it year round. So for the mossy frogs, the corticales, we usually recommend something like a 24-inch long by 18 inches wide and high tank with like 3 inches of water in the bottom or so. And you can kind of fill that out with immersed plants. Some really good ones for that would be like spathiphyllum, anthurium, syngoniums, stuff like that. And
Where you stick the roots right in the water and then it grows out of the
yep,
water. Yeah.
put lots of pieces of wood for them to climb and sit on, and that also helps to support those plants as well. They do like a lot of cover. They're pretty shy. And you could fit any of the species in that size of tank. You don't necessarily need to go as large for the smaller ones like your bicolor or stellatum or asperum, which are species we've worked with in the past.
Yeah.
Something like a 10-gallon could work for those, but you can always go larger as long as you're making sure that everybody's getting enough food regularly. They'll use the space you give them at night.
Cool. Cool. Talk a little bit about their activity level. Like, are they more nocturnal? Are they awake during the day? Like, what's their when are they most active?
Absolutely more nocturnal. A lot of times they'll come out when the lights shut off on the tank and pretty quickly start calling if it's the right season. They have this very cute, kind of little bit haunting, kind of a whooping call, especially the cortical. It really carries. And those are another frog, like a lot of them that I've mentioned on the podcast, that because they're nocturnal, it's really ideal to be feeding them as late in the day as possible, so that they're getting their food when it's nice and fresh, nice and gut loaded, dusted with your vitamin and
Yeah.
calcium supplements. The bicolor can tolerate getting fed a little bit earlier. Usually, I find that they're a little more bold, a little bit more voracious than the cortical, but those original mossies, they're pretty shy. So you're going to want to make sure that if you're going to see them do anything in particular, you're probably going to want to stay up to watch them after the lights go off.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to do with nocturnal animals, like red eyes are another good example, is set their daylight cycle a little bit earlier. So maybe in your house, it's lights come on at 6 a.m. and off at 6 p.m. That way you can see them later on
Exactly.
in the afternoon. All right, you mentioned stellatum and asperum. Can you talk a little bit about size, where they fit? Are they in between bicolor and cortical? Are they smaller? Talk about size and how they're a little bit different than the other two Thelodermas.
So those are a bit different looking. They're darker, browner, not nearly as bumpy, both of those species. They're known as the Tonkin bug-eyed frog in the case of the stellatums, and then we refer to the asperums as the Vietnamese bird poop frog. And they're actually smaller than the bicolor. They're really just little guys, maybe half the size of an adult bicolor. And all of these frogs do fine in groups. Very similar care for all of these species, although we would not recommend mixing them because there's that extreme size difference. The cortical could just go ahead and eat anyone else if it felt like it.
Yeah. You mentioned keeping them in groups. They're male, female groups. Is there like what in that 24, 18, 18, how many would you keep of, say, the cortical, and then of the smaller sizes, how many would you keep in those sizes of enclosures?
Oh, you could maybe do up to 4 cortical. Don't want to overload it necessarily, so say maybe up to a half dozen of those smaller species. They are not as demanding about having super clean water like most frogs are. In fact, it can actually be detrimental. If their water is too pure, it can lead to eye issues.
Wow.
So we do like a 50% water change once a week here. And if you've got like plants growing in your water, wood sitting in the water, it'll help with kind of releasing sort of natural organic compounds into that water. We'll also throw a couple of Indian almond leaves in, like you would use for a blackwater fish tank or tadpole tea. And that kind of helps to give them that sort of nutrient balance that they want. And if you're using like an RO water or something for your base, definitely want to add some minerals back into that with a product made for that sort of thing.
That's interesting that you're talking about dirty water and,
Mm.
and how it's actually beneficial for them. That's really cool. So you want to make sure that it's not crystal clear water. You want some organic material in the water.
Yeah, and obviously if you're seeing things like poops or dead feeder crickets or whatever other bugs you're using, you want to remove those. You don't want to just be leaving big old chunks of waste to rot, but
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be pristine.
Yep. You mentioned crickets. So how do you feed something crickets when you have a water base, and how do you keep the crickets out of the water and keep them from just drowning in the water?
So if you've got some nice broad pieces of wood, you can release the crickets out onto the wood for the frogs to catch. You could also use like a little floating deli, kind of a boat setup like we do for a lot of our frogs we keep on water here, like our reed frogs. I think we've got a video on the process on our website you can check out, where you just take like a flat kind of rectangular deli container sort of thing, put a little bit of damp paper towel on the bottom, and then release your crickets onto that. Um, Definitely want to kind of wedge that in between some wood if you're going to be using it with the mossy frogs, the big corticales, because they've got so much mass to them. I can see them just hopping onto that and capsizing the whole thing and making a mess.
That's cool. That's cool. And then also keeping in mind that they're nocturnal. So
Yep.
putting the crickets in there at the very end of the day. So they're not
Exactly.
spending the day jumping out into the
Yep.
water. Yeah, while they're not eating. That's cool. You mentioned breeding. You guys we keep males and females together year round. Talk us through a little bit about when they lay, and is it certain times of the year? Do we have to cycle them? How do we get them to start breeding?
So we keep them at pretty consistent temperatures year round here. Like I mentioned, they are cooler weather species. They can tolerate temperatures from 50 degrees to 80 degrees, but high 60s, low 70s is very much their ideal.
Mhm.
So you don't need to worry about heating systems for these guys. Um, and it'll usually be like a couple of times a year. We'll kind of see a boom of breeding them. And the eggs are hard to miss as long as you're doing regular checks underneath wood and stuff like that. Sometimes seems like certain individuals even will have more of a preference for laying their eggs underneath pieces of wood, but
Interesting.
then some of them will just pop them out in the water wherever. And the cortical, they're huge eggs. They're way larger than you would expect out of any frog. If you're familiar with like bubble tea, it's like the size and the consistency of those boba pearls, kind of
Really?
like the Solomon Island leaf frogs, except of course these are in the water.
Interesting.
And we'll let them develop until the tadpoles hatch, and then pull those tadpoles out. Keep them in water that's pretty similar to the kind of temperature and nutrient balance and whatnot that they were living in with their parents, and then wait and wait and wait, because these guys have really long development times, especially the cortical.
Now, talk to us about numbers. How many cortical, bicolor, sparum, stellatum? Like, how many eggs? Is there any differences between the species and how many eggs they're laying at a certain time? And talk a little bit about how prolific they are.
So I haven't really been doing these projects for long enough to have a lot of years that I've been able to notice patterns personally, but they're not nearly as prolific as a lot of other frogs. They're not releasing just dozens, hundreds, thousands of eggs at a time. Over a period of a few weeks, they'll be releasing a handful of eggs at a time.
Gotcha.
And sometimes they won't be fertile. You'll be able to tell in a few days that there's no development and just want to remove those out so they don't rot like any other waste. And so you'll maybe get, like, if you're lucky, a couple of dozen tadpoles over a few weeks. But it kind of depends on just sort of what they're feeling like. Had tons of tadpoles last year. Unfortunately, they didn't really make it. New breeding groups might not have quite kind of had everything figured out internally. I don't know. But we've got a smaller group of cortical tadpoles, smaller group of bicolor tadpoles this year that are looking really good and steadily coming out of the water one every couple of weeks or
Yep.
so.
That's cool. That's cool. Now,
Bouncing
what are
back.
we feeding those tadpoles? And is that changing over the course of the life of those tadpoles?
So the main part of their diet is the Josh's frogs, tree frog, and tadpole food. They'll also eat a little bit of the like Rapashi Soylent Green and boiled spinach and stuff like we use for other tadpoles. They don't seem to have super huge appetites. So what we found works better to kind of maintain their water quality where they want it is we'll feed them like 3 times a week and then do a water change on them once a week, just like the adults. Um, and they seem to do pretty well on that. They just keep on growing consistently with moderate amount of food, and they just take a long time, so it's kind of a slow and steady process.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We talked a little bit about how we set them up. Any special lighting that you guys use for these guys?
Not particularly. We recommend low-level UVB lighting like we do with pretty much all of our frogs so that they have that ability to come out and bask if they want, synthesize some UVB, synthesize some D3 from UVB themselves. If you want to have a plant light, if you've got live plants growing in your tank, which I highly recommend, helps keep the water a little bit cleaner, looks fantastic, provides them natural cover.
Cool. Cool. You mentioned a broad range of temperatures, 50 to 80. Like how often are they experiencing that really cold environment here at Josh's Frogs, and how helpful do you think it is that temperatures actually drop that low? Do you think that's helpful for them when it comes to breeding?
That's not really anything they're experiencing here at our facility. If we've got our animal areas dropping to 50 degrees, that's kind of a concern unless we're trying to specifically brumate something. So it's kind of a in case of an emergency, just know you shouldn't panic as long as they're within these temperature ranges, but it's not anything that we deliberately put them through at this time for trying to encourage breeding. Maybe at some point when we've got some more spaces fleshed out for doing more detailed brumation processes, we might try it out and see what we can do, but that's not currently anything that we've been doing to see how it affects them or anything.
So people could be successful with them long range, keeping it in normal room temperature in their house. They would need to.
If you're trying to breed them, there are folks who say that the colder the temperature, the more likely you are to get female mossy frogs. Females are really rare, and it's not totally understood exactly why that is, but the most common theory is that it's something to do with they have some kind of a temperature development sex determination process when they're tadpoles.
I've heard that wives' tale. I know people that swear by it, and I know other people that think that it's just hogwash. There's something else. It comes to show that there's something we don't quite understand about them, and something we need to do some more research on. So that's cool.
All of these species are starting to become potentially sexable around 6 to 8 months of age, but none of them have really extreme sexual dimorphism, so you kind of got to look at the nuptial pads and know what you're looking for.
What are you looking for on those nuptial pads? What are you looking for?
So both the males and females have pretty well-developed texture on the bottom of their hands and feet for gripping onto damp surfaces, but the males will have more reddish and robust, really bulbous nuptial pads around the bases of the thumbs on the front feet so that they can get a good grip on the females during amplexus and breeding.
That's cool. That's cool. Anything else that you would want us to know about the mossy frogs, that group of frogs that we haven't covered already?
I think I've hit most of the big and interesting points. Keep them cool, feed them at night. Don't keep them super squeaky clean.
Cool. They mossies are one of my favorite frogs. I love the camouflage, but I am just very much drawn to bird poop mimics. I just love. I just think that's the coolest camouflage, and when it comes to frogs, so I love those guys. So cool. All right, we're gonna move to a lightning round. You've answered some of these questions in the past. Maybe your answers have changed a little bit. You can pass on any of them if you don't have an answer, but just give us the first thing that comes to your mind. All right.
All right.
If money and space are no issue, what's your next pet? If you money and space are not an issue. You got unlimited space, you got unlimited money. What is it that you would keep?
All right. I think the past couple of times I've mentioned emus are really cool. A little bit more realistic than that. I would love to have the space to do some really big, elaborate enclosures for some really big, cool frogs that are not super common in the hobby, but would be really awesome to work with at some point.
Yeah.
Some things that come to mind would be like the giant Malaysian river toad, the Chilean helmeted frog, marine toads, especially like the giant Suriname localities. Stuff like that. Even like a really nice African bullfrog enclosure that gives them an opportunity to display a whole range of behaviors would just be really fun to set up.
Yep. I think as a hobby, we're getting into bigger enclosures, and I think that's really cool for us as a hobby to allow the animals to experience some natural behavior and give them space to actually do that. That's really cool.
Yep.
All right. Besides Josh's Frogs, what's another business that's either breeding really cool animals or producing really cool products? Who's somebody you'd like to give a shout out to?
So it's just kind of a little small business. I don't know a ton about the owner personally or anything, but there is an Etsy shop that I bought from a couple of times for tank decor. It's called Digitally Sinful, and they've got a lot of stuff kind of aimed more towards crested geckos, but you can use it for pretty much any sort of arboreal reptile or amphibian you like. Lots of cool perches and feeder ledges, stuff like that, and I've gotten some really neat like resin mushrooms and branches that are attachable to the sides of your enclosure with magnets, kind of like the Magnaturals products that I use for my tree frogs and my snakes.
That's cool. I love that there are people creating really cool, unique pieces for our hobby. All right. In all of the world, what's your favorite animal or plant? What's the coolest creature or coolest plant on our planet? What's something that's really cool?
That's a really hard question. I'm just going to go with historically what I think I would have said as a kid, which would be I've always really liked leopards. They're just gorgeous cats.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they're always a showstopper when we at the zoos. Like I was just at the zoo with my first grader. Like that's what all the kids in her group wanted to see, the big cats.
Got really lucky. Got to see some cute little fluffy leopard cubs a couple of years ago at I think it was Hogle Zoo. I was there for a trade show, and that was really neat.
That's really cool. I love the leopards, big, especially on the snow leopards, the big, huge, fluffy tail. I love it.
Yep.
All right, you got an hour of free time. What are you doing with that hour of free time?
Reading or working on tank maintenance. There's always some plants to trim somewhere, or stuff to rearrange. I have lots of frogs and lizards and whatnot at home. So they're all in live planted bioactive tanks. So lots of things that grow and want to grow outside of their spaces sometimes.
Yep. All right. Last question. You got people listening to you. What's one piece of advice, either about the amphibian reptile market or just advice in general that you'd like to give people?
Partially done is better than not done at all. It's another sort of life truth thing that's taken me a long time to figure out. But if you're lucky, you find the motivation to finish whatever you were trying to accomplish. And if nothing else, you've got part of it done and you can come back to it later, whatever it is you're working on.
That's really cool. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Amelia. Thank you for educating us on Mossy frogs. Check out some of Amelia's other videos on our YouTube channel. She's also done some writing for us as well, too. You can see some of the stuff that she's written for us. Thanks a lot, Amelia, for educating us on Mossy frogs.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoy this content and want to stay up to date, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us across social media. We always want to bring you the best content, so let us know what you think in the comments. And for all your reptile and amphibian needs, be sure to check us out at joshsfrogs.com. We have an amazing selection. Until next time, stay curious, stay froggy, and keep exploring.